I'll try not to talk about
And
tampons. Shoot, we're live.
and we're live. Yes. Always talking before your turn. I'll
I
have to.
know.
I'll have to set boundaries. We need a better what do you call it?
Three,
A
two,
better
one.
system on who's boss and who isn't.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Well-established parameters.
Yes. Okay, we're live, and as always,
Good luck with
chaos.
that.
So that's good. Yeah, Pastor Luck didn't show up. I couldn't reach him. At least he had a courtesy to say that they've dropped the ball and we've rescheduled for Monday. Which isn't that big of a disaster, because at least we get to have my favorite scientist on Twitter on our channel, Melody. Hey, Melody, how are you?
Hey, I'm fantastic. How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're fine. We're just have to lower our aggression a little bit because of what just happened, but that'll be
we're
gone
not
in a
that
couple of
bad.
seconds. No, we're not that evil. We're atheists, but not that evil.
You should have some chocolate. That would be okay.
Okay, I have some chocolate bonbons here. Chocolate with cherry.
That sounds
So-
fantastic.
Yes. And alcohol. So
I don't see a problem here.
no, nor do I.
Look
Okay.
at what Keith said. Keith said, telling you even tried to pray and no response. He's talking about
I'll have
Pastor Locke.
Okay, I don't have the stream in front of me yet, so I'll have to figure out. I did have it a couple of minutes ago. I might have clicked it away. I'll go find it. Won't be that big of a problem. Okay, so Mel, we already talked about you coming on. I had a question or a topic we might be able to discuss, because I think there's one thing you excel in, and that's in how to get your science to the people on Twitter and the people that follow you there and on YouTube, because I think when it comes to education, you have a great way of educating. How important is it to you to be well, as clear and as easy understood as you are?
Well, I think a lot of the issues we run into, especially when you're dealing with people that are resistant to science in general due to cultural beliefs. I use cultural because there's several different individuals that, groups, especially groups that feel that they can't have a bridge between science and their belief systems.
Right.
So if you're able to communicate it in a way that is non-threatening, that says, hey, I understand that this is what you believe, and that's okay. I just want to make sure you have the correct information, because oftentimes, I actually talked about this in my latest episode of Hey, Scientist Mel, about how science is used to push bigotry. And that sort of thing, to where saying, well, we have an XX chromosome and we have an XY chromosome. It's just male and female. It's not that simple. And so oftentimes you encounter people that use science to push their particular agendas, but really at the heart of it, they don't understand what it means. And so being able to go and say, hey, I understand that this is what you think. This is how you feel. This is the incorrect information. Here's the correct information. You have a fantastic brain. I want you to use it and come up with your own conclusions. That's usually the way that I go about that, and has been the most effective, given that I live in the Bible Belt and I've had to teach evolution to a bunch of farm kids who are practically in poverty. I know what they're told in their churches and at home. They have the wrong information, and empowering people that have been in a situation where they have been told what to think their whole life is pretty powerful. To sit there and say, hey, I'm not trying to change your mind. I just want to make sure you have the right information and you have a great brain. Come up with your own conclusions. You know, I just want to give you this. This is what it actually is. And it's painful for a lot of these people. I wrote a blog post about having to deal with a particular student of mine, super bright, made straight A's, took not only my biology 1 class, but my biology 2 class, heavy fundamentalist Christian, loves Ken Ham. But when she sat in my class and I showed her, this is the evidence, she was intelligent enough to sit there and go, you could see the conflict in her face. This is painful for a lot of these people, because at some point they have to reach an understanding that they've been lied to somewhere. And
There's
they have
also
to.
the fear.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's fine. Yeah. And there's a fear and also thinking that, is this wrong for me to think this way? Am I a bad person? You know, and I've had a bit of that struggle myself because I grew up out here. I know what they're told. I was brought up in a very heavily religious background. So I kind of, having that knowledge going into a classroom with a bunch of farm kids, knowing what they've been told is a bit of, you know, and I'm like, I know what they've been told. But they've never been respected for their own mind, and to say, hey, you know, I'm never going to tell you what to think. That's not my job. I want to teach you how to think, and you come up with your own conclusions. That's what I want you to do. Make up your own mind.
I think it's a huge contrast from what they normally encounter, because, you know, when these same kids, having been one of them myself, they'll go from an environment in which they're told, you're lower than dirt, you deserve to go to hell, what you think is getting you condemned, and Jesus had to die to save you from how you think. They're going from that environment into an environment that where their teacher is telling them, I value how you think, and I want to teach you how to think even better.
Exactly.
I think the contrast must be pretty stark for them. I know it would be for me.
It is. And so the first year that I taught, that was what we call the gauntlet. So I had kids that were preaching in my class. I had kids that were like, it was a nightmare. And then I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just going to address the elephant in the room. They're going to be voting in like 2-3 years. They'll be 18 then. They'll be, you know, they're going to be able to make their own decisions. I'm just going to go with that. And so, and part of the state standards where I was teaching at the time was that they had to know about evolution. And I just flat out told them, like, look, you guys are going to be adults in a few years. You're going to have to vote. You're going to have to do all of these things. You're going to have to know what stuff means. And so at the when Mitt Romney and Barack Obama were running for president in that election, there was a lot of heated debate, and I could hear, I wasn't hearing the kids, I was hearing their parents, and I knew I was hearing their parents through them because they didn't know what they were talking about. And they looked at me and they're like, well, Miss Melody. I'm like, yes. And they said, what is your position on politics? And so what I went through, because a lot of them are like, I'll never need biology, I'll never need to know this. And they asked me what my position was in politics. So I went and found all of the dumbest things that politicians have ever said. And I put one up on the screen. And one of them was Todd Aiken, where he was one of the rape guys. That's what we call them here. Call him one of the rape guys, because he worked with Paul Ryan to try to institute a bill. It was a pro-life bill, but they wanted to essentially tell the difference between rape and legitimate rape.
Oh, that guy. Oh, my gosh.
That guy.
From Missouri,
yeah, right? Todd Aiken, that guy. So I posted that quote on there, and I said, essentially, he's trying to say that if it's a legitimate rape, a woman's body will shut down the pregnancy. And then all of the students just looked at me, and they're like, well, a woman can't do that. I said, see, you're all smarter than people who run this country. That's what I think of politics. So And then they were like,
well,
oh my God. I said, this is why you need biology. So you know when people are telling you things that are not true or possible. And then, you know, I tend to not have issues after that because I was very honest with the students. I was very forthright. And I'm like, look, this is how it is and it sucks, but that's where we're at. So, and they just are not used to that. They're used to people sugarcoating things and telling them things that, you know, it just were not true. And they were like, well, I don't believe in evolution. And I go back to that one girl because she really was so smart. She made like 95s out of 100 on my test. Took not only Bio and Bio T, which was mostly organic chemistry, which is enough to make anybody cry. So she sat there and I could see in her, because she invited me to her church once during the Bill Nye and Ken Ham debate. And Bill Nye got a lot of flack for that debate. And so she said, you should come to my church and watch it with us. And I said, well, do you need somebody to explain evolution to you? And she said, well, no, I don't think we'll need a speaker. I said, well, I could, you know, I have a lot of work to, I was working on my 3rd degree at the time. And I thought, well, I have a lot of work to do at my house. I could just like work on this. But if you guys need a speaker to explain evolution, I'll come, you know. And so she came back after the debate and we're sitting in class and kids were, you know, again, the kids were asking me, they're like, what did you think of Bill Nye and Ken Ham debate? Did you watch it? And I'm like, yes, I watched it. And I said, what did you think? I said, I'm going to leave it to the very last question they asked. I said, they asked Ken Ham, would anything ever change his mind? And he said, no. They asked Bill Nye, would anything ever change your mind? He said, yes, evidence. That is what I think. You can always change my mind, but I need evidence. And then the one girl that's super freaking smart looked at me and she said, you know, nothing will ever change my mind. I said, I'm really glad our court system does not think like you because I'm going to need evidence to send somebody to the electric chair. So, I mean, I'm going to need evidence. So, but she respected me enough to take my biology 2 class. And I think I might have got through to her, but she was so smart. And I'm just like, let me just save one. Let me just get one to think for herself because that one has something in her and I know I can see it.
Honestly,
and you could
free thinking at that age. Yeah, she probably wanted to, but at that age when they're a minor, still in control of their very fundamentalist, very authoritarian parents, it can be scary to think for yourself because there are so many repercussions that you might face at, you know, being under their roof.
Right. And then if you go to try to find somebody to talk to about it, you know, it's difficult because then you talk to somebody like, oh, well, she's a scientist. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And this is somebody, she clearly respected me. And I never told her, you know, you're not allowed to think that way in my class. I never said you're not allowed to believe what you believe. You're not allowed to do this. I just, you know, I preempted everything I ever talked about every year with the kids would ask me, why don't we talk about creationism in this class? I said, I don't have a degree in religion. I would look at them and say, you can bring me your car, you know, and you can say something's wrong with your car. And I might have fun taking it apart. I probably would really have fun taking it apart. I can't guarantee I can put it back together. And I don't know that it would work. I don't have a degree in car repair. Why would you want me to talk about religion? I have like degrees from a bunch of old people that say, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to science. I talk about science. If you want to talk about religion, you go to an expert in religion. And so you get that out of the way in the beginning. You're like, I don't have a degree in religion. I have a degree in science, and this is a science classroom. I'm going to talk to you all about science. I want to make sure you have the right information. I want to make sure that you know what you're talking about, and you come up with your own conclusions, because that's what science is. It's not about me telling you what the answer is. It's about you thinking about it and saying, okay, this could be an answer. This could be an answer too. Which one is more likely? That's what I was trying to instill. But so much of that is lacking, especially with No Child Left Behind, with the way that teachers have to teach a test. It's
Right.
It's upsetting. And, you know, half of my evaluation as a teacher was based on how well they did on a test on one day, one single day. 50% of how good of a teacher I am was based on a test.
Oh.
And all I needed was a kid to get in an argument with their parents, their boyfriend or girlfriend. I had one get in a car wreck as they were on their way to take the test. So I needed that, or them not to have breakfast. I had one child, I say child, they're a teenager, that was regularly beaten by their grandfather. You know, I didn't know that until the following year, but fortunately the guidance office knew about it and regularly kept up with it. But I mean, that's, you know, so all you need is somebody to have a really bad day and bomb a test, and all of a sudden you're a bad teacher. So it's problematic in the regards, and I completely understand that respect of the education system. So I'm not so hard on people that say, well, this is my belief system in this, because I get it. I understand. But at the same time, you have to reach a point to where you're, hey, this is what the evidence is. And they have to come to terms with they've been lied to at some point. Somebody's lying to them. And it's hard to deal with that.
What are the range of reactions that you encounter in your classrooms when you see that they're struggling with the competing viewpoints between their homes and what they hear from you? I mean, there must be some range of reaction that you encounter.
There are some people that completely shut down and don't want to talk about it. And there are some that are willing to listen to evidence, but still disagree. And then there's some that are kind of on the fence. And then there's some that are like, yay, science, all about this. Anybody else is ridiculous. You know, so it's the Breakfast Club. If you've ever seen that film, that is exactly a high school classroom on any given day. And it has not changed. I don't actively teach now. I could. I just finished my master's in May, master's in chemistry. So I'm looking at an industry position. But I could teach. I was pretty good at it. 5 was perfect. I think I left the field at 4 after 4 years of teaching. So I don't know. I've considered going back many times.
Congratulations on your master's, by the way.
Thank you.
If I can jump in, because I was terrible at science and I wasn't even interested in science when I was in school. But I think that if I would have had a teacher like you, things could have been different, because when I watch your videos, it's just fun to watch. The way you have about you when you're talking about stuff, when you're actually teaching, I think is what makes your videos so good. That's what makes a lot of people who is that interested in science watch them, because you have a catching way of presenting what you have.
Well, thank you.
Well,
I do try.
I would agree.
I do try. I find that if you're not enjoying what you're talking about, that comes through a lot. And it's interesting because the last high school that I taught at, I was teaching biology, but they paid me to stay after school and tutor chemistry. And somebody pulled me aside, and I won't say who, and they asked me to please talk to the chemistry teachers to help them. Because a lot of my former students, they left my class and they entered chemistry, and they came back this like, I miss you so much. Oh my God, I miss you so much. I said, look, I told you. I told you that it was going to get harder the further along you go. But I think if you don't enjoy talking about your content, that comes through. It really does. And when they say teaching is a bit of a calling, I enjoyed it. I didn't hate it. I was offered the graduate assistantship at the university. They're like, hey, you can come and we'll get you a master's. And they paid for it. And I got a fellowship. So I got like doubly paid. And it was pretty nice. And I thought, all right, this is okay. And so I did some research. I made a cancer test. And I'm like, all right. So it was fun for me. But I enjoyed teaching. I got to talk about science all day. I'm like, what cool thing can we talk about? And the kids walk in, I'd be talking about genetic engineering, and I'd be like, who wants to look at glow in the dark kittens? And they're like, oh my God, I do. I'm like, so do I. So let's talk about it. So, I mean, I don't understand how people who hate teaching or are miserable in it, I think it's probably largely due to the politics involved. It's never the kids. The kids are always the same. They're the same every single year. You have the same type of kids.
Hear that, kids? I mean, you're all the same.
I mean, yeah, I'm serious. It is the Breakfast Club. You have your jocks, you have your nerds, you have your geeks, you have your princesses. It's just, and if you go into it knowing what to expect, they probably have been told the wrong things about science their whole life. Okay. They would rather be at home playing video games. Okay. So would I. And you have to make it interesting. My master's project, which you can find on my website on scientistmel.com. I have all of the work I've done there under my About section to where you can see my research that I've done. My whole first master's was based on linking content mastery to interest. Nobody has really done a lot of research in that. And it's common sense, you would think. You're like, if somebody's interested in something, they're going to do better at it. So I did an experiment based on raising interest in content on personality types, diversification of instruction and in assignments, allowing kids to be able to show me what they know in different ways. And then I found that the students who were interested in what they were learning about did better. And even in the high performing kids, the super high performing kids that know everything already, if they weren't interested, they didn't do as well. I had kids that were like, I hate science. All of a sudden, I like science. They did like 30% better on test scores if they were interested. So, I mean, trying to make it fun is probably the biggest part of the battle, because I don't know. I think I'm trying to find that connection with adults, because adults, their time is so limited. They're like, I need to understand why it is important for me to know this. Like with the whole global warming thing. Well, if you don't understand climate change science, okay, your food is going to get more expensive because we're going to have to irrigate stuff. If you live out where I live, all the corn is dried up. I mean, I should probably do that. I should take pictures of all the cornfields. They're dead and dried up. Our corn mazes are going to be crap this year for Halloween because they're all like brown. It's like, what corn maze? They're all like
just go through there with green spray paint, just spray them all green.
That's it. Painting the roses red. We're in Wonderland. Right. So it's like, we're going to have better irrigation in order to feed our families. We're going to have like expensive electricity because it is crazy hot. And it's going to be crazy cold. So heating, it's going to hit people in the pocketbook. They're not going to be able to afford electricity or food. So trying to make it relevant in a pressing matter in regards to adults, I think is extremely important. And to do it in a way to where it's not so painful, like comedic and fun, is exceedingly important. So that's kind of why. I do what I do in the way that I do.
And that kind of ties into what I was just going to ask you. I was wondering, is there really a difference in your experience between getting that enjoyment X factor in your teaching between children and adults?
The only difference is that you can probably be a bit more cheeky with adults. So,
yeah, probably.
You can be a bit more cheeky with adults. And, you know, I never swore at the kids, but I probably could and could have gotten away with it, but I wouldn't have, just because the professionalism. But I could tell jokes. I could tell really smart jokes that the smart kids would get, that the not as science savvy kids would get, and the smart kids would just be rolling in the chair. There was one kid. Right. Yeah, and so you can tell it's, I don't know. There's ways to be endearing to teenagers versus ways to be endearing to adults. And the ways to be endearing to teenagers is to kind of link in and, you know, and understand what their currency is. And what I mean by currency, there are some kids that will do work for marshmallows. There are some kids that will do work for an opportunity to play Uno. There's some kids that will work for a minute to be able to just put their head on the desk and take a nap. So once you find out what it is that a person wants in exchange for time that you spend with them working on something, that's inherently valuable. So as adults, understanding what it is that they want to know why this is important. They want to know why they need to learn it. Cornell just came out with a whole, like a free course on climate change. I'm like, nobody who needs to see that is ever going to take a course from Cornell for free, even if it's online, because one, they don't get college credit. Two, adults are not going to sit through long lectures at Cornell University unless they get college credit or something in return. Three, they don't understand why that's important. Right. I mean, you know, if you can't talk about it in 20 minutes or less, if it's not interesting, and if you don't say, this is why you need to know this, because it's going to affect how, you know, you feeding your family.
So basically you're talking about incentives. We really need to pin down those incentives for the people that we're talking to.
Exactly. Incentives are exceedingly important because, I mean, adults come home, they don't want to spend a lot of time on the computer because they're on it all day. And then when they come home, if it's not going to be beneficial to them in some platform in their life, and if it, and especially if it's fun, if it's beneficial and fun, they're like, okay, I'm on top of this. If it's not beneficial and it's not fun, they're like, why in the world am I doing this to begin with? I don't understand why I'm here. So.
Right. Well, I think there tends to be kind of a dichotomy between fun and professional, and people want to keep those separate. And if we want to keep a professional setting, then so many times they've just cleansed it of any element that is fun because it seems to break that setting. And I'm wondering if there's a way to meld the two so that, you know, the people who are listening in aren't suffering for unnecessary lack of fun.
Right. One thing that I find is really interesting, I saw an interesting video kind of talking about comedians and how they have had very accurate coverage of politics. And they have called
Jon Stewart.
You know, what, John Oliver, Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, all of this, they all call it like, there's like, this is not normal. Who is looking at this and going, oh my God, this is completely okay. They're calling it like it is to a degree, but they're doing it to where they're pointing out the fallacies. And so I'm developing a comedy show right now. I'm hoping with in video form, to where I'm gonna just rip apart pseudoscience and point out the ridiculousness of Goop and Deepak Chopra and David Wolf, all of these individuals that push this ridiculousness of, you know, you need to pay $75 a month for these vitamins when it's the same formulary as what you would get at Walgreens on a buy one, get one free, and you can get 4 months worth for $12. So, right. I mean, so to be able to bring it in a way. They're like, okay, we're going to talk about this particular concept. And you can do that with multiple biological concepts and kind of throw it out there to make it a little bit cheeky and funny, but in such a way to where they're like, okay, this is why you need to understand why we need biodiversity in the rainforest, because we might find a drug that is just as good as periwinkle, which cures childhood cancer. You know, it's a chemotherapy drug that St. Jude found. But we might find another particular drug in a plant that can do, you know, things with a different cancer.
Which we can't do if all the plants are dying off.
Right, because we're mowing down the rainforest. So, but to make it practical but funny, blatantly obvious in John Oliver Daily Show form, and like to where it's funny, and they're like, okay, yeah,
Love John Oliver.
He has a really good video, and I watched it again today about bad science, and how journalists in Fox News and the Today Show will pull out a particular study. If you drink a bottle of wine, it's the same as going to the gym for an hour. I'm like, no, it's not.
No, it isn't.
Why
don't I drink a bottle of wine every day and just see how my figure suffers over the course of the next month? I'll skip the gym. Who needs the gym? I'll just drink wine.
Just drink wine. Just sit on the porch out in the heat and drink wine and pass out on the ground and be like, oh, look, Melody's on the ground. She's burning so many calories. Just leave her there. She's okay. But to kind of do it in that way to where it's not, we think, and I'm actually giving a talk on it actually in 13 days, September 27th. I'm appearing at Nerd Night Memphis, and I'll be going there and giving a talk about the science literacy crisis. And I'll be a bit cheeky. It's actually a venue called the Rec Room, which is mostly video games and a bar. And it's freestanding video games. So they have like Donkey Kong and they have Street Fighter. I know where I will be. I will be like beating everybody at Street Fighter versus Capcom. I'll be at that game console. And then, you know, after I'm done talking, I will go and play video games. But
sounds fun.
Yes, but I'll be addressing the science literacy crisis and the fact that, you know, it's people do not understand what words mean, but it's not only important that they understand what words mean, but why they need to understand what words mean. And I think that's what we call the adult disconnect. And so I'll be talking a bit about that, about how Yale did a study in 2016, how they surveyed people and they found out that 70% of Americans felt like there should be a cap on carbon dioxide emissions. Okay. And then they also found out that 70% of Americans felt that climate change would affect Americans, but only 27% felt that it would affect them personally.
Right.
So
like they're not Americans or something.
Well, yeah. So they're like, we're not the Americans that it will affect. It'll affect people that aren't us.
Others. Always the others.
Yeah. So 73%.
Well, I did. I did see an article where people objected to having windmills installed because that would somehow make for it that there wouldn't be any more wind. I'm not sure how I have to put it, because putting up windmills would ruin wind.
It'll block the wind.
It will slow down the wind and heat up the planet. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yes, I've also seen an article that solar panels would weaken the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So,
gosh. Yes.
To me, that's horrible that people can even come up with ideas like that, and they're serious about it. It's not a joke.
Right. They're completely serious, and it's genuine concern on their part. So that's why you have to be careful in how you approach them, because if they think that you're being rude or, you know, like, because clearly people who spend a bit of time just reading things will know that that's not the case. But you encounter people that don't have access to a lot of the same resources as other people. So you have to sit there and go, okay, why do you think this? Where did you hear this? Okay, well, I'm not going to try to force my opinion on you, but here's where the correct information is. This is the correct information here. This is easy to understand terms. What do you think now? So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
what do
how
you do with the emotion? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I mean, that's just how you have to usually do it, at least for me where I live.
So when it comes to stuff like this, you know, solar panels damaging the sun, caps on our emissions affecting everything business, when it comes to different theories like this, how do you approach the emotional investment that people have in these thoughts? Because many of them, you know, they've done so much research in all the wrong places, and they are emotionally invested in this. And if they're found to be wrong, all that time is wasted. Their contacts may get mad at them. How do you deal with that?
That is a good question. I've found that usually you have to be the person. I mean, you're going to be the bearer of bad news to a degree. But if you handle it in a way to where you're respectful of the other person and say, okay, I understand that these are your sources. I have a bit of the advantage of saying, okay, I have 4 degrees. I have these going on. This I can accurately represent science. Here's
like
what
you legitimately are a source.
To a degree, yes. So I can sit there and say, so I can sit there and say, this is what science has to say about this. Here's the information. You know, and that's where you say, look, I get where you're coming from. I just want to make sure you have the correct information. Look at everything that's available to you and make up your own mind. You have to kind of put that responsibility of learning on the person, especially if they're one of those people that have done a lot of research. If you give them additional resources, they'll go and look at them. They may not always, you know, come to Jesus, as they say. They may not have their come to Jesus moment where they're like, okay, I understand things now. Everything makes sense.
I repent.
I understand now. They may not have their come to Jesus moment when it comes to science, but the thing is they'll know that they can come back to you without being ridiculed or berated, you know, without feeling stupid. I think a lot of adults, and I talk about this in my first podcast episode, where one of the issues with science communication is that some scientists are not approachable. And it's not because they're bad people. It's just because they're so smart and intimidating. So, for instance, Neil deGrasse Tyson is smart, you know, and he's really smart, and he's an astrophysicist. He teaches at Harvard. I feel like I know enough information about physics to where I could go up and ask him a question, and I'm pretty certain I could have a good conversation with the man. But somebody who doesn't have a working knowledge of physics or thermodynamics or, you know, basic physics would probably feel intimidated and be like, well, I can't ask him this question. I'm going to feel pretty stupid. I mean, so, and I feel a little bit
I'm in that category. I mean, I have some education in thermodynamics because of my own background, but I would still be afraid of asking him something that can just be readily Googled. Like, why am I asking a mind like Neil deGrasse Tyson something that any Joe could find off of Google?
Well, because it's Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it would be cool to talk to him. That's just me, but I don't know.
I would have exactly the same reason. I just find anything just to ask and to be able to have a chat. So
I'm a little bit more, I guess, fragile in that regard. I mean, I was in a call that involved Aaron Ra, and he was in that call too. I said almost nothing. I could not speak. So a little bit off topic. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What?
Oh no, that's Professor Brian Cox. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter. Professor Brian is my favorite astrophysicist. He teaches out at Manchester, but he's on the BBC a lot, and he does a lot of different shows. He does the human universe. If you've not seen it, you absolutely have to see it. He discusses human evolution, and even to the point to where he discusses the current theories involved with the development of the brain, how we're the only species that have managed to leave the planet and go to outer space. It is a fantastic series, and I love it so much. So if I saw him, I would probably fangirl, and I would try really hard not to fangirl.
I do the silent fangirl. I freeze.
No,
in my mind, I'm like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
You didn't do the silent one?
Like, oh my god, it's my
you were so loud that he acknowledged it, and he was happy. He was happy with you doing it. So
what?
That's not entirely a problem. He liked it.
I would love to just sit and have a chat with Professor Ryan.
You and Aaron Ra. Charis.
I don't think he'd even remember me. I don't think I said one coherent sentence that he heard or understood. I felt like Mr. Intelligent does not. Oh gosh, that's so mean.
For what I know about Aaron, I think he'll remember. The guy has a memory that's astonishing. I wish I had that.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a question in the audience for Mel.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a quick question, and then we can go to the audience. Because that's something that I want to have out. I put all the appropriate links in the description to your website, to your YouTube channel, and to your Twitter account. Which brings me to the question that I wanted to ask. A lot of people these days think they can get science from a YouTube video, and I don't think that I'm saying something silly when I say that almost every flat earther will come up with the only source of science being a YouTube video. What are your thoughts on that, Mel?
I think
because there's good science, but there's also a lot of nonsense.
There is a lot of nonsense, and so that comes okay. There are good things on YouTube and there are bad things on YouTube. Much like in the scientific community, we have good studies and we have bad studies. So what I try to do is to educate people on identifying what is a good study versus a bad study. And again, you can kind of apply the same things to YouTube videos. I had somebody, and I get interesting people in my mentions on Twitter. And
I bet.
I've done a video about this. I called it The Science of Flat Earthers. I'm going to redo it with a newer format because I think it would be better. It would be better justified in that. But I discussed all the things that could possibly be going on in the brain of a person that believes the earth is flat. And so I was talking about that, and somebody jumped into my mentions and said, "You're right. The earth isn't flat. It's hollow and expanding."
I saw that.
I was like, oh my gosh. I said, okay, so it's like a balloon with heated air on the inside. So the earth is just like a giant
I'm pretty
balloon.
sure they're being sarcastic. I don't think they were being sarcastic with this.
They were totally real, and they had a YouTube video, and he told me, he said, I use this computer program and I put in the dimensions of the earth at this period of time and this period of time. And you could see that it's different if you just watch my video. Okay. I've worked in computational chemistry. Okay. I've worked in computational chemistry, meaning I've dealt with computer programs. I spent about a weekend. No, probably a week. I say a weekend. It probably felt like a week. And essentially what I was doing was I was trying to get a particular compound to fit into a receptor in this program. Now, this receptor has two ends. It has an end that faces the outside of the cell and an end that faces the inside of the cell. Now, there's no way that this compound should be connecting to the bottom of the receptor, because that would be the inside of the cell, but that's what the software was doing. I went, this doesn't make sense. Weird. And so I'm going, this doesn't make sense. So I spent all this time trying to figure out what the settings were for this particular software, because this was fairly new territory we were working with. Right. So I'm sitting here, I'm going, okay, so I'm trying to get this particular compound to fit in this receptor, and it keeps connecting at the bottom. That's not right. That's not how it works in nature, but that's what it's doing with this program. The point being, it was two or three settings that were different. You can type in numbers to a computer software program and come out with completely wrong information that's not indicative of any kind of experimental values. And so I had experimental values that I knew were correct, because we had them in the lab. They're like, this is what this experimental value is. This should fit in the receptor this way, and these are the numbers we should get. And I'm like, why is it connecting to the inside of the cell? That's not where you go. I was like getting all Happy Gilmore. Go to your home. Go to inside the receptor where you're supposed to be. Why are you connecting in parts that you shouldn't connect to? It was frustrating. So I was trying to point this out to this person. I'm like, I can watch your YouTube video all day, but if your settings are wrong, it's not going to matter. So if your settings don't match up with what the experimental data shows to be true, it something's wrong, and it's not going to be the people that have measured the Earth and the Earth to be this certain size, because we have the International Space Station, we have measurements from that. So we know what size the Earth is. And so you can plug them into computer programs all day, but that doesn't mean your result's going to be correct. So people get that wrong often on those YouTube videos. So being able to just fundamentally understand the scientific method, how to spot bad science, that can be applied anywhere, whether you're an English major or a history major, it doesn't matter. The sample size, the conflicting interests, sensationalized headlines, any of that can be applied across the board, whether it's a journal, like a news article, or a journal article, scientific article, YouTube video. If you're able to isolate and identify those types of characteristics, you're going to be okay.
Right. Just out of curiosity, when you're talking about, you mentioned journals and stuff, I'm thinking of the peer review process. What does bad science look like? How is it treated when it runs up against rejections in the peer review process? Because we've had somebody on recently who had his own theories on reality, on intelligent design, and he's had nothing approved, nothing successfully peer reviewed, and he thought it was all basically because nobody else knew better than he did. They didn't understand his theories. So what does bad science look like as to good science as far as the peer review process is concerned? How does it fare? What does a rejection look like?
Okay. I still have a paper that's under review, that's been under review for about 3 months. So I've spent 2 years on that project, and it's for a cancer test. And I wasn't the only person who worked on it. I'm a co-author. And the initial comments that I got back on my email, there were 2 separate emails. It took me through 10 scrolls. And this was to nano letters. I think the paper is going to be submitted to Theranastics, which it was originally into nano letters because I was dealing in nanotechnology, and now it's probably going to go to Theranastics. But they go through and they rip it apart. And these are people that are considered experts in the field. So when you present a paper to somebody in that regard, they're going to ask you, okay, this was the data you got. They're going to bring up things that maybe you haven't thought of before. Are you certain that the numbers you got here are for the sample reason, Or could it be that you have excessive noise? Noise is a common term associated with other things that might be in a sample.
Factors you aren't factoring in.
Right. So you need to be able to explain all of the factors that are associated with their questions. So I think some of the questions they asked, how do you know that this binding happened? How do you know that it was this and not something else? How do you know that this signal was exclusively for your test and not something else? And so when you go through, you have to be able to answer all of those questions. And if you don't have the answers to those questions, you don't get published. So that's essentially where that comes into play. So if this particular person had submitted their paper to peer review, they would be published if they were able to legitimately answer those questions. And when you look at, I know Deepak Chopra has several publications, and he publishes in a lot of the alternative medicine type of journals. You go through, they look very sciencey, and he's able to explain away a lot of problems that he has with the science. And so if you're able to explain away a lot of the problems with the science, they'll go ahead and publish it. But people don't understand, they don't realize just because you get a publication doesn't mean it's necessarily good science.
Right. And it sounds like, I mean, I was asking this because some people question the process of peer review and how it may be biased for one ideology over another. And I'm asking this because the questions that you're telling us are being asked are very sensible, unbiased questions. They're just something that you would expect to be required of a legitimate scientific finding.
Exactly. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson had a tweet recently that says, if you think, I don't remember how he phrased it, but essentially he was saying that basically if you go to a science convention or a science conference, everybody is trying to one up everybody else. It says, you want to be the guy that proves Stephen Hawking wrong. You know?
Right. And I think a lot of them don't understand this. I mean, we talk about, I mean, so many, I'll just use creationists, for example. They think it's not all of them. Many of them think that it's a big conspiracy, a global conspiracy to push this theory of evolution because of, you know, huge grants that scientists are apparently living, you know, so high off the hog on.
Oh, goodness.
But they don't, you know, they don't understand the incentive for disproving evolution. I mean, the reward, the prizes for doing that, I don't think they get that.
I think, okay, being a former graduate student, I made $15,000 a year, and I helped develop a cancer test that was high throughput. It's a mini device, 3D printing. I used all kinds of different technology, grassrooted it, and I am... Again, I made $15,000 a year as a grad student. 18 if I was lucky enough to have my mentor carry me through the summers. So there's not that much money at all involved in academia. And to be quite frank, I could make just about, if not more money as a high school teacher right now than an associate professor in my state.
And just so they know, if any of them are listening, if they doubted what you were saying for whatever reason, whether they think that you just don't know about the cases that they know about, where might they go to verify what you just told us?
As far as salaries or peer review or what?
Yes.
All of it. Okay. As far as peer review, I actually did a Scientist Mel shorts on peer review where I used Elsevier and I went to their website and I used some of their graphics to explain the peer review process. So you can go to my YouTube channel and see some information about what is involved in peer review, and it's explained for you there.
What's the title of that video for everybody?
It's, oh gosh, let me see. I think it's, let me pull up my channel right now. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to pull up my channel. as you do. Let's see. And I can tweet a link. I have different series of videos. I have the Science Of, which tends to be between 30 to 40 minutes. I have Scientist Mel Shorts, which tends to be around 3 to 8 minutes. And then I have my Science Minute Monday, which usually is about 3 to 5 minutes. And I talk about various topics. Let me find my peer review one. Okay. Yeah, it's actually called Peer Review Scientist Mel Shorts.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So
And
if
I'll put a link to that one in the description.
Okay.
So people can find it here as well. And
yes.
then they're automatically on your channel.
Yes. And so they'll be able
I
to
have
find that information.
I have one question from the audience, and I think maybe a compliment. We have one young Earth creationist, as far as I can see at the moment in the chat, and he complimented you on your videos and thinks you're doing a good job. So
yay!
At least that's you have one compliment already. But he asked a question.
Okay.
Is there a difference in the USA between the number of male and females taking up science as the chosen profession? And what do you think might be the reason for that?
Well, I know I've been reading a lot about that in light of the Google Manifesto, because I get asked questions a lot in regards to that, especially with the male-female brain, which I'm quite sick of having to go through sometimes, but not everybody understands things, and sometimes they need time to process it. But one website, let me see if I can find that. Oh God, I'll link you to it later. There's one particular study that I cite in regards to my Women in STEM video. I address the lack of women in computer and engineering fields. And this was actually prior to the Google Manifesto. So the Science of Women in STEM, if you watch that, the last chunk of it, I talk a bit about the issues regarding computer and engineering. Now we see that there's about a 50-50% representation of men and women in chemistry, biology, physical science, all in regards to the other STEM-based fields. We see about a 50-50% representation. But with computer and engineering, it's tanking. It's actually dropped since the 80s, and there's a very low amount of women in that particular field, even though women are credited to developing a lot of the programs that we use now. I mean, all of NASA was coded by women. We have a whole film on that called Hidden Figures, about African American women coding the computers for NASA. And we have women that are associated with computer engineering, but they're not picking that field. I can't think of the study now, but I will send you a link when I think of it. I cite this particular study. I think it's the American Association of Women in Universities. I think it's the AAWUA. They did a study about women in engineering, and they found that there are women getting computer and engineering degrees, but they're leaving the field. They're walking away from their jobs, and it's largely due to a hostile work environment. So that's what they found. I think that study is from 2016, maybe 2015, but it's if a study's within the past 5 years, I consider it relevant. Unless it's like a textbook case, then it's highly relevant, like the Milgram experiment, that's something else. But in regards to that, we know that women are leaving engineering and computer fields largely due to hostile work environments. They're getting degrees in these fields. They're trying, but they're leaving. And so it's quite troubling for me when I encounter people that say, well, women just don't want to be in computers. I'm like, no, women are responsible for computers. That's not the case. It's something else entirely. And they're like, well, maybe their women brains just don't want to do it. No, that's not it either. They're still getting degrees, but they're walking away from their jobs because they don't want to deal with their environment.
Do you think that's worse in the US than it's anywhere else? Because you frequently visit the UK.
I don't know as much. I do know from my visits in the UK, the attention to science is far different than the US. My favorite place in the whole world is Natural History Museum in London. I love it. It seems like science is its own beautiful thing, like an art museum, or it's a completely different, but London is a different bear altogether. You get in the outskirts and then you encounter more bigotry. I mean, we've seen it with Brexit. I actually landed the day that the Brexit vote came out, and I walked in one of the marches for my friends who couldn't go. I didn't say anything, but I just showed up as a body for them because, you know, I don't have a dog in that fight. So I thought, they're like, well, I can't go to this march. I'm like, well, I'll go for you. And
well, you have a little bit of a dog in that fight, because you were quite vocal that you would rather live in London than where you are now, or did I have that wrong?
Oh no, I mean, I do love London, and I probably would rather live in it than here. London is a different city. It's multicultural. And they celebrate knowledge. If you've never been to the Natural History Museum, the first time I walked into that, I think it was 2012. I think it was 2012. When that first trip to London, June of 2012, I walked in the Natural History Museum. It is like an entire building that's just meant for life. You'll look at the brickwork, and there, in the very brickwork, there's images of species that are extinct, or plant life, animals. They have a giant sloth. I mean, there's a giant sloth. I didn't even know they existed until I walked into that museum. They have all of the dinosaurs. There was like a first edition signed copy of The Origin of the Species by Darwin in their Treasures exhibit. They have a statue of Darwin. I visit him every time I go, because I mean, that book kind of changed my life a little bit. So when I saw the first edition signed, I was actually moved to tears, because that's the most beautiful form of art I've ever seen. So, but to me, it's just, they celebrate knowledge in a different way. And it's kind of disheartening to see a lot of the politics going on right now, because that's not the London that I know and that I feel when I'm there.
Okay. So now we have a very nice London Bridge. We also have, I think, someone from London joining us here.
Oh, okay.
So I would like to bring him in. He's the Honey Badger on Twitter. He also has a YouTube channel. Does, I think, something a little bit similar to what Charis and I do.
Okay.
And I completely forgot his first name, so he'll have to introduce himself first. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello,
Hi.
Mel. I just want to say congratulations, Mel, on the work you're doing on Twitter and your website. You must be getting through to them, because, well, you have a young Earth creationist who says you're doing good work, so you must be sinking into some certain extent.
From Britain.
Yeah, not quite London, but not too far. I'm about 2 hours, right in the middle of the country.
Yay.
Yeah. How often do you visit the UK?
I'll actually be there next month. I try to go, I usually go a couple of times a year, but I've been working on my second master's. I've been a bit slow about it, so I haven't been there since last summer, but I will be there next month. So it'll be fun.
That's work related, yeah.
Oh, no, not work related. It's
Not
totally
work.
holiday.
Holiday.
Yes, I'm staying with a friend who lives out in Richmond. So
Oh, that's very good. Very good.
yeah, I kind of favor her a bit. And so she gives me her Kew Gardens pass. And so I just kind of wave it a little bit. I'm like, please don't ask me to talk. So it's like, oh, here's my pass. And they just wave me through because there's always a giant line. So it's just like, I have a pass. And then I visit my favorite gardens.
Yeah. What kind of content would we be expecting for the next week or so? Have you got anything special planned?
Well, for my podcast, I just talked about, because I think it's heavy, especially lately, especially in the U.S., where people use science to push their bigotry. So the latest episode that I just posted on my Patreon, it'll be available on my website in a couple weeks, is in regards to using science or misusing it as a means to push a type of bigotry, type of agenda. How they say a woman is an XX chromosome and a man is an XY chromosome. And often you see this type of interaction on the internet where people have a complete and total disregard or a lack of understanding of genetics. And they use basic textbook, and I say textbook because they don't go beyond like a certain amount. And I talk a little bit about this, especially like with people who don't understand evolution. They stop like with the first half of the second law of thermodynamics, and they don't complete it.
Thank you.
And you're like,
that bugs me to no end.
This is like in a closed system. The earth is not a closed system. You understand information theory. And that's where I start describing to them, you can reinvest energy into information, and that's what DNA is. And people are like, what? And so I think this Saturday for the show, I don't know what's winning. I don't know what I'm doing on Saturday until my poll is done. I can go look at it really quick. I literally, when I say, what do you guys want to talk about Saturday? I post the poll and I wait for them to pick, and then they let me know. So right now I have, final results is over. I guess I will be talking about the autism spectrum on Saturday.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Because the 4 choices were HIV, history, and immunity. The second one was decision making. The third one was autism spectrum, and the fourth one was love. And so the majority of the people picked the autism spectrum. So I will be talking about that on Saturday. In regards to the other videos that I do, like my shorts or my Science Minute Monday, I just I record those in advance. Those are not interactive. And then I just post them on YouTube. So I tend to just write those and just post them. Somebody had mentioned, I don't understand dark energy or dark matter. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. Let me learn about that. And so then I know a little bit about dark energy. So I posted a Science Minute Monday about that. And then I think GonnaGoForIt was like, hey, can you do a video about natural selection? I'm like, I can do that. So I did a 4-minute video on natural selection. So those videos, those are kind of like up for grabs. I'm like, okay, well, if somebody needs that, yeah, sure, I can do it. Why not? That's pretty easy for me.
Which is another good reason to follow. Oh, sorry. Which is another good reason to follow you on Twitter, so people can make suggestions, and you actually make the videos for them, so they can use them if they so wish to.
Yes.
Which makes your channel a little bit unique, I guess, because there are not a lot of people doing it this quick, because you're usually quite quick to respond to a request that comes in through Twitter. At least I've seen a couple that came back quite quick.
Well, I mean, I understand that there are like a lot of questions that are associated with a fundamental lack of understanding. One of them being evolution, another one being thermodynamics, another one being the earth is not flat, it's not hollow and expanding either, anti-vaxxers. So there's a lot of lack of understanding in basic fundamental science. And on my website, I do have all of the lecture slides that I used when I was a biology teacher. I'm working on other resources for people who want to understand chemistry, physics, things like that. So I'm working on that steadily to try to increase that availability for people who even want to learn on a, personally, not necessarily have to be a teacher in a classroom. And that's why I also post all of the slides associated with my videos on my site. So if you're more of a, I want to slow down and look at this and look at the sources kind of person, I do have slides. I put all my slides on my website for that too. And even with my podcasts. So if you want to go through and read the slides while you're listening, you can do that. Or if you want to look at my sources, you can do that too.
Okay, we have a question in the chat which I wanted to address. Christian Diplomat, which is Steve from Manchester, the creationist I was talking about. He's become a friend on Twitter through talks and talking on Twitter, but he had a question. He says, I'm high school only education science, and he finds it hard to read scientific papers because they go a little bit over his head. And he says, he says he often watches to learn from Google, but do you have any tips so people don't get misled by fake stuff, which would be pretty much what I there's a lot of fake stuff out there. How can you make sure that the one that you're looking at has some good science?
That's a good question. I've got the first 2 episodes of my podcast, Hey Scientist Mel, on my website. And actually in the second one, I talk about how to read a scientific paper. And it's live right now. You can go listen to it. The thing that I would recommend you do, first of all, when you go through a paper, you want to read the abstract so you get a general idea of what it's about. If you feel like it's over your head, you need to highlight the words that you don't understand and then Google those concepts. If they are a bit too much for you, find somebody who's a science communicator like myself and say, I don't understand this concept, because there are so many of us on Twitter. And if you manage to like click on the hashtag SciComm, you will find people and they'll be able to explain things. I can explain things to you. So once you highlight the words in the abstract that you don't understand and you've looked and you've tried to find the concepts and you still don't understand, hit up a person on a SciComm account. The next thing you do, when you go through, what you want to look for, if it's bad science, the sample size is going to be very, very small. Before you even go through all of that, look to the end of the paper and see what the conflicts of interest are. Now, the reason why I say that, the national, well, it was like the Heart Foundation of the US actually had a study funded by Nestle. Nestle is a chocolate company to show that dark chocolate reduces your risk of heart disease. But it was funded by a chocolate company. So you kind of have to look at that. So when you look at the abstract, scroll to the bottom of the paper to see who's funding the site, what are the funding the research, what are the conflicts of interest. Then you can get a general idea, like the whole Andrew Wakefield autism vaccines thing. He was paid by a vaccine company to prove a competing vaccine company was causing autism with their shots. So that's going to be a big teller. The next thing you want to do is you want to look at the sample size. If it's, and this is where it can get hairy, especially for the technical papers. If you're dealing with a lot of instrumentation, or you can get involved with NMR, spectroscopy, various types of that. You can get into all kinds of different type of microscopy. If you feel like you're over your head That's when you go to a scientist and you're like, what the heck does this mean? Oh my God,
Okay.
can you look at this paper?
Just a quick question, but you said there's a hashtag that people can use to ask a scientist on Twitter?
Yeah, if you look at SciComm, if you click on that, or if you want to ask me a question, my mentions fill rapidly. That's why I tell people, please use hashtag #HeyScientistMel, and I can find you faster. Because if you just mention me on Twitter, I lose a lot of people. I don't think people realize that. Like, you didn't answer my question. Like, did you use my hashtag? Because I get likes, retweets, mentions. It's just, it floods. So.
Okay, but you mentioned there's also a hashtag where several scientists on Twitter could answer your question, which is hashtag SciComm.
SciComm. I would think that if you were to search that hashtag, you could find multiple people that were in science communication that would be able to help you. Because I use that hashtag often, because SciComm is the short acronym for science communication. So if somebody's tweeting that, then more than likely they can connect you to a science communicator.
Okay.
Very nice.
And the hashtag for you was hashtag Scientist Mel?
Hey, Scientist Mel. Yeah.
Hey, Scientist Mel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Use that.
I'm just putting those in the description as well for people who are listening, so they can track you down and ask you questions.
That's cool with me, because my mentions fill rapidly. I don't think people realize that. So I keep telling them. I'll wake up and I'll have like 40 people, 40 mentions, 50 mentions, sometimes more than that. I've woken up to larger than that, and trying to just get through all of them.
It can amount to a lot quite quickly at some points. So I don't get that much because I don't have that much to say. I think I'm just a guy asking questions for the most part.
That's okay. We need to ask questions.
I know.
Don't get me started. I won't stop.
I did notice in the first part a little bit.
Sorry about that.
It was quite easy for me to be on this in the first part. So, but no, I'm just teasing Charis now, I think. I hope. But yeah, well, I do have another question. If you make a science video, do you put any sources in the description for people so they can check up more, maybe?
Usually I reserve that for my slides on my site. So if they want, because I upload all the slides that I use for my video onto my site, so they're able to pull up the PowerPoints and they can look at the sources there. And I do that also for my podcasts. And I mention them. I know on a few of the Science Minute Mondays that I've done, I talk about the sources where you can go to learn more information. But I'm most certainly happy to direct anybody to whatever sources they need in order to learn more. But I think on my website, on my educator resources, so if you go to scientistmel.com and click on educator resources, you'll find all of the slides that I use for all my shows. And usually one of the last slides has a list of all my sources.
Okay. I think we need. I think you did a fabulous job in revamping the what was a blog, I think.
Thank you.
As a full-blown website with an enormous amount of information for people to go and look up. It not only looks cool, but there's a lot to find there. Can you sum up what we can find on scientistmel.com? Because a lot has changed from what you had before to the new website.
The new website essentially is kind of like a mirror to my WordPress. However, it does have a section just for slides as far as PowerPoints associated with all of the shows that I do. In the newer format. I will go back and redo, I think, ironically enough, the cannabis episode where I shot it on my phone is the highest viewed one that I ever had. So I want to redo that in the newer format so people have a bit better information than before. But on the
high anyway, they won't care.
I talk about cannabinoids and the receptors associated in the brain, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. So on the website itself, there's a space for all the slides. It's called Educator Resources. There's a space that's called the show, which has links to the YouTube videos that I've put up in the newer format, and then the flat earther one, as well as the cannabis one, because those are actually popular. And I did shoot them on my phone, so please be forgiving with that. I'll do better when I read.
Just as long as it's not vertically.
It is vertically, and I'm sorry now.
Oops.
I was a newbie. This was like 6 months ago. so there's those, and then if you go to the
I guess you can be forgiven.
Okay, thank you.
Well, to be honest, Charis, we can't judge because we don't have video at all. We're still waiting to get everything ready to get video out. So
you better not make it vertical.
I'm not making it vertical.
You better not.
No, I'm not. But at least she has video. We don't even have that yet.
You know, so, and I think on my sci-fi one, I wear a cowboy hat and I shoot a Nerf gun and everything.
That's great.
That's why I love your videos, because there's always something unexpected that's going to happen.
You'd fit right into my part of the country. I live in the Bible Belt.
I live in the Bible Belt too.
Midwest?
No, in the South. I'm, you know,
even deeper.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah. I feel like I'm in a perpetual Twilight Zone episode. The first year I taught high school, I parked in the parking lot next to chickens and pigs that were just walking around. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so weird. but yes. So I was like, there's a pig just walking by my car. And he's just like, hi, Mr. Pig. I'm going to go teach science. So it's weird. It's a strange thing to be out in the Bible Belt in the South.
Mel?
Yes.
You have a rather pleasant message in the comments. It says, Christian diplomat, I need to sleep, so we'll go now, but want to tell Mel that her passion for science is inspiring and kids in her classes are blessed to have such an awesome teacher. Anyway, night night.
Oh, how sweet. I don't teach high school anymore, and I feel like sometimes I feel a bit guilty, especially when I left the trade to go and work on my master's in chemistry. I felt a bit guilty because I felt like I was really kind of reaching them. So
well, at least you're making up for that in your videos, and I think that's why, because I've watched you go to your Twitter account, Scientist Mel, and I watched how fast that grew and how many people actually go watch your videos. That grew quite quick.
It did, and it's like kind of leveled off now, and I'm sad. But that's okay.
Oh, that's why we need to bring it to attention to a lot more people, and that's why I always try to steer people to channels like yours and to your YouTube channel and now to your website, because what we do, we engage with people on Twitter and have talks there. We do that, the same thing here on YouTube, but a lot of people do the same thing, and they might need stuff where they can link people to find good science. And that's where you come in. You provide a service for a lot of people on Twitter that maybe not everyone is aware of, but I think we should promote. So we'll do our best to get the word out for you.
Well, thank you. And I know you actually made the intro that I use now, which is really awesome.
Thanks.
It's really awesome. I get a lot of compliments. I'm like, wow, I like your new intro. I'm like, oh, you should go thank GonnaGoForIt on Twitter. He made it.
He does a great job.
He does.
Yeah, well, I tried to get it as close to your personality as I could, and I think between me, because I did have help on that one. We have to mention Tony Hack and Slash,
Yes.
who because I had the music, just not in the correct length of the intro, and I have to say Tony did a great job editing the music, so the music fits the content of the show, and with that you get the images, which were your own words with a little sciencey touch to it. So I didn't do all that much. I just threw in everything I saw and tried to get it as close to your personality as I can get, which is mainly my goal when I make something.
Well, you did a good job, and I thank you for it.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. So, and yeah, it's we need to help each other when we have YouTube channels. That's why people might not know it. We in a DM room on Twitter where we exchange ideas, because we when it comes down to it, we all have the same goal, and to maybe educate people in different fields. And I just talk and try to get people to reason, but we need to help each other and need to promote each other's channels to get the word out there, because I still think that education is should be a primary goal in every country, and it's what you in the US now you have Make America Great Again. If you want to do that, you have to start with education, which is something
I
the
agree. Yep.
current administration isn't quite doing.
This is true. I agree with that. Well, I have to go soon.
Okay.
No.
It has been great having you on. Thank you
It's
so
been-
much for coming.
It's been lovely talking to you guys. This has been fun.
Yeah,
You-
we'll have to do it again.
We're always fun.
Absolutely. And you guys are fun.
Okay. Thanks for coming on, Mel. It happened a little bit soon. People might think that you were just here because someone else didn't show up. That's not entirely true.
The timing
We,
was because of it. But
we joked a little bit in the DM group, and so come on. But we already had talked about having you on in a show at some point.
That
you
is
had
true.
agreed to that. And you had agreed to that. So you're not just a replacement. You were actually on the list of people to talk to, and it was great talking to you, and it was great because you have an enthusiasm for science which is catching, and I think a lot more people could benefit from that, because that's what makes your videos, even the short ones, so much fun to watch and easy
you
to
got
watch.
spunk, kid. You got
Well,
spunk.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
You say that in the UK, it means something else.
Yeah.
Oh no.
It does indeed.
Shoot.
I learned to use the word sassy when I'm in London. Sassy is the word to use.
What did I just say?
You know, I might need to tell you privately.
Okay.
I think you do.
There's a sexual connotation to that, Charis.
Right up my alley.
Would that help?
I can probably
no, right up
read
your alley.
between. Oh no, not again.
That's like worse.
No, just imagine what it was like when I was. I used to do this all the time when I was a fundamentalist. I would just, they would just fall out. I mean, innuendos, just the left, the right, they just kind of tumble out, and it's just how I was, and I was causing scenes everywhere I went.
Mm.
Well, with language it's always tricky because I have a friend in Australia who had a situation, and I told her I'm rooting for you, which is something completely different in Australia. I don't know if any of you are aware of what it means in Australia.
I need to go pray to Google for just a minute. Hold on.
Well, it's also sexual. It's in sex is rooting. So
well then,
sometimes you can make a fool out of yourself without even knowing. And
this is
when it comes to
interesting.
language, it's even more easy to do it.
fantastic.
But thanks for coming on, Mel. And we definitely need to do this again. Come up with a good topic we can talk about.
I know what that means, and I'm not British. Oh, just so you know, I am a descendant related to Sir Walter Raleigh for my London friend. So, yes, I have a bit of cred.
Okay, and
Nice.
For the people who don't know who Sir Walter Raleigh is?
He was a suitor of Queen Elizabeth prior to the Golden Age. She was the Protestant queen, daughter of Henry Tudor. And if you go to the Tower, you can see where Sir Walter Raleigh had his last days prior to being executed by King James.
I just looked up spunk while you were explaining that. That's great.
You're welcome.
Well, I can spare myself that embarrassment next time Honey Badger's on.
Yeah.
Honey Badger's gonna go back to his room and be like, "Oh my god, that was so funny."
Leave your spunk at home next time.
Right.
Oh,
Mel has spunk, does she now?
We have another.
Not
we
at
have
the
another.
Swimmers.
We have another in the comments. I think our biggest follower on here, Beach, says she had a brother who remained in England and asked if I wanted to be knocked up in the morning. Which some people might not know, but knocker-upper was a legitimate job in Britain at some point.
Oh, yeah, it does. It's not a job here.
And just to be clear, a knocker-upper is someone who would come to your house in the morning with a long pole and tap on your windows because people didn't have alarm clocks. Yeah, I know, Charis.
I'm sorry,
But
I'm 12.
They tapped on your windows to awaken you because they didn't have alarm clocks. So they knocked on your windows so you could get up. Hence the term knocker-upper.
That's quite a nice thing for them to do.
Yeah.
If somebody did that to me now, they're gonna get hurt.
Knocked out.
Yeah, I'll be like, especially if they're doing a clown outfit. No, that's grounds for getting pummeled into the ground very quickly by me. So.
I may only be a green belt, but they'll quickly see what a green belt can do.
there are a lot of things that we don't have anymore that would have, if people were still doing it today, would be quite strange, because in London they also had a public toilet, which was a guy running around with a bucket, and he had a giant coat, so people could hide under his coat and do their business and then carry on. I think if you were to see something like that happening in modern day London, you would be quite scared. A big guy coming towards you with the coat and then slowly opening it. And
say, do your business in my bucket. I'm like, no, son. No.
I would hate to be his family, and then him coming home at the end of a long day working and taking off his coat.
See, I live just north of one of the top 5 most like dangerous cities in the United States. When I'm downtown, I walk like I'm angry and pissed off. So I'm like, no, stay down, son. Stay down, son. I know how to hurt you. So, some dude in a coat coming at me with a bucket. I'm like, no, son.
No, we're not doing this.
You're gonna learn. You're gonna learn something today.
Okay, so
Scientist Mel will educate you.
we're at a point. I think would be good to end it here. I don't know where we would be going if.
So. Our listeners have now presumably learned what spunk and root means in their respective countries.
Yeah. Well,
yay,
at least we
education.
did something. For
you know,
we did something.
And it has to do with biology. So
yeah,
I'll just make that excuse, which I'm sure every teacher has heard.
Okay, but thanks, Mel, for coming on. It was great, and we'll do it again.
Absolutely,
and,
this is fun.
Thanks,
awesome.
Honey Badger. I don't know your first name.
Still.
Well, I would give it you, but a few Muslims, I'm pretty sure, want me dead, so I'm gonna have to be the Honey Badger. Still.
Oh, let's not do that then.
We'll stay. We're still with Badger. That's fine.
Our Badger can stay Badger.
They managed to find out my name and my location, so
it
wasn't very good.
So. Thanks to
my
co-host Charis.
Oh, for me?
Yes, for coming on.
Oh,
because you're not in everyone, so it's always nice to have you around.
Why, thank you.
We need to have you around a little bit more. I think the other ones would agree.
Just to bump your rating from G to R.
I don't have a problem with that. and for the people who sat through this and are curious, Pastor Locke wants to come on next Monday. We'll see how it goes, if things are better in his communication with the people he wants to talk to. Okay, so we'll end it at this point. Thanks everybody in the chat for listening, and everyone who's going to listen to this after it. Thanks for your time. Subscribe if you don't have already, and you can follow me on Twitter. You also can follow Mel.
Hello.
The Honey Badger is the Honey Badger wins.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Yes.
On Twitter. And well, as for Mel, every link is in the description. Go look her up. Go see her website and her videos, because they're awesome.
Well,
thanks everyone, and see you all next time.
Thank you.
Yay! Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.